Year was 1875. The wind on the ridge howled like something mourning, dragging itself across the prairie with claws of frost. Snow drifted in pale ribbons across the open land, blurring fence posts and footprints until even memory could not follow them. Colt Baylor rode slow beneath the darkening sky, his duster flapping behind him like a battered sail. His horse, a quiet gray with frost gathering on its whiskers, snorted steam into the silence. The world was white and hushed and waiting. He hadn't planned to ride past the Harper place. He never did. Folks whispered of hollered fights, of a girl who never smiled, and a woman with eyes sharp enough to curdle milk. But the snow had swallowed the trail behind him, and the wind pushed him forward like a hand between his shoulder blades. He didn't believe in omens. He believed in weather. And tonight, the cold felt cruel. The first thing he heard was not a cry, but a kind of breathing, a ragged rhythm, like someone trying not to sob, trying not to die. He slowed his horse near the fence line, peering through the snow and dusk. That's when he saw her. Tied to the post like some disobedient calf, the girl stood barefoot in the snow, her thin shift soaked and clinging to her knees. Her wrists were bound behind her with rope, her arms trembling violently against the cold. Pale hair clung to her face in strings. She wasn't looking at him. Her head tilted up, lips moving silently, as if speaking to the sky. Or to God. He dismounted before he even realized he was moving. "Hey," he said gently, not wanting to frighten her. The girl flinched, but didn't turn her head. Her eyes remained half-lidded, milky and unfocused. "Please don't shout," she whispered. "Mama says I don't deserve to be heard when I disobey." "I'm not going to shout," Colt said, already pulling his knife from his belt. "You cold." She gave a tiny smile. "It's not so bad. The snow hushes everything." He sliced the rope with a clean motion and caught her as she slumped forward. Her arms were red and rope-burned, her fingers blue. He wrapped her in his coat and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low, afraid it might break something sacred. "Elodie," she whispered against his shoulder. "Elodie May Harper. But Mama don't call me by it much." "She your mama?" "Stepmama." A pause. "Mama died when I was 6. That's when the dark came." He carried her to his horse and mounted with care, holding her close as if the cold might reach inside her and steal something permanent. She didn't speak again for the rest of the ride, only breathed soft and even against his chest. When they reached his cabin, low-roofed, snug against the tree line, he pushed open the door with his boot and brought her in like something precious. He laid her on the cot by the hearth and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Then he lit the fire. Real licking flame. Not some dream to die by. She stirred. "You got what that smells like cinnamon." "Juniper," he said. "You hungry?" "A little. Mostly thirsty. Mama says I drink too much and waste things." He ladled warm broth from the kettle and brought it to her lips. She sipped without spilling. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "To deserve being tied up like that." She took a moment. "I asked if I could have the blue scarf. My mama's scarf. The one that smelled like her. Pearl said I was clinging to ghosts. Said if I loved the dead so much, I could go feel what the grave feels like." He said nothing, just placed the empty bowl aside and stoked the fire. "I'm not sick in the head," she said softly. "I just don't see." "I know. You believe me?" "I saw the rope burns." Silence folded between them like a warm coat. The fire cracked. Snow tapped gently at the window. "Do you know what color the snow is?" she asked suddenly. "White." She smiled. "I always think of it as soft blue. I imagine it like quiet music, like something from a lullaby." He didn't correct her. That night, she slept on his cot, her small frame curled into the warmth like a bird. Colt sat in the rocker across the room, eyes half-lidded, listening to the wind outside. Something had shifted, not loudly, but enough that the silence in the cabin no longer felt like loneliness. The next morning, he walked into town with heavy boots and a heavier heart. At the sheriff's office, he found Tillman Root sipping weak coffee and reading last week's mail. "I found her," Colt said. "Found who?" "Elodie May Harper." The sheriff set his cup down slowly. Pearl said she ran off. She was tied to a fence post in a storm. Tillman rubbed his jaw. That's a serious thing to say, Colt. I'm not saying it. I'm swearing it. You planning to keep her? She's not livestock. Tillman studied him for a long time. People are already talking, you know. Let them. Later that day, Maggie Jean found Colt at the general store. Her hands were full of molasses and dried beans. I always wondered when someone would do something, she said. That girl's been living like a ghost since her daddy passed. Pearl never wanted her. Only the house. Colt didn't reply. You'll need a story to tell, Maggie said softly. Town won't like what it can't label. He went home that evening with more than food. He brought thread and soft cloth and something else, something he hadn't held in years. Hope. When Elodie awoke, she was surprised by silence. Not the silence of cold emptiness, but the kind made by warmth. The fire still burned. Somewhere she could smell bread. She reached out, carefully tracing the edge of the cot. Is it morning? Late afternoon, Colt said, entering from the barn. Snow's easing. She smiled faintly. That means sound will come back soon. He set a wrapped bundle in her lap. She unknotted it slowly, felt the soft threads of wool between her fingers. A scarf. She raised it to her face and inhaled. It's blue, he said. I know. He didn't ask how. Over the next few days, she learned the corners of his home by memory. The porch step that creaked like an old man's laugh. The window with a draft. The kettle that sputtered before boiling. He learned, too, the pace of her steps, the way she tilted her head when listening for birds, how she paused before reaching for something unfamiliar. They did not speak often, but their silences were kind. In town, the whispers began to rise. What kind of man brings home a girl like that? She's blind. What good can she be? She should be sent somewhere proper. A girl's places. But no one finished that sentence, because they remembered how her hands looked, and how Colt had stood, quiet and unmoving, in front of Pearl shouting. One afternoon, Elodie asked, Do you think kindness makes you weak? He didn't answer immediately. No, he said. It makes you noticed. She nodded. I think I'm ready to be noticed. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the world turned lavender and gold, Colt lit the lantern and placed it on the windowsill. Elodie sat by it, fingers laced in her lap. Why there, she asked. So folks can see it. See what? That someone's home. She turned her face toward the flame. I like how it warms without touching me. He watched her in the quiet. Outside, snow began to fall again, softer now, like ash from a fire that refused to go out. And then 3 hard knocks at the cabin door. Colt stood slowly. Elodie tilted her head, listening. Is that her? I don't know. But the wind shifted, and with it came the smell of old perfume, sweet and rotting at the edges. Colt opened the door, and there stood Pearl Harper, red-faced, jaw-clenched, and not alone. Behind her, 2 townsfolk, watching, waiting. Elodie did not flinch. She rose, her scarf around her shoulders like armor. Tell her I'm not afraid, she said softly. And from where he stood, Colt could see the lantern flame reflecting in her clouded eyes like the start of something that would not burn out. Not ever. The air between them turned tight and brittle, like glass pulled too thin. Pearl Harper stood in the doorway with her fists clenched and her mouth curled like it had tasted something bitter. Behind her were Judd Wilker and May Amos, neighbors who knew better than to meddle but couldn't resist a show. Snow clung to Pearl's shoulders like she was being swallowed by the very cold she'd once used to punish a child. She's mine, Pearl hissed. You've no right to keep her. Colt Baylor didn't move. His frame filled the cabin doorway like a mountain filling the mouth of a pass. Calm, firm, and cold as riverstone. Inside, Elodie stood behind him, hands light on the back of the rocker, her head tilted slightly toward the voices, eyes unfocused but alert. She's not cattle, Colt said. And she's not going back with you. You think this looks right? Pearl snapped, addressing the watchers. A man like him, alone with a blind girl? What kind of decency's that? May flinched, but said nothing. Judd cleared his throat. You tied her to a fence in a snowstorm, Colt said. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse, it was certain. You left her to die. That's the kind of decency we're weighing now. She's blind, Pearl barked. She's a burden, not a daughter. I fed her, didn't I? Kept her alive. You kept her afraid. Elodie didn't speak. She didn't need to. The scarf around her shoulders spoke loud enough. Her fingers, resting lightly on the rocker, barely trembled. She breathed through her nose. Calm. Present. Like she had chosen to stay here, not escape there. Pearl's face flushed dark red, but it wasn't rage. It was shame. And even shame couldn't stand long in cold silence. She turned and stormed off, boots crunching in the snow, followed by her watchers, who said nothing. Colton closed the door right away. He let the wind move through the doorway, stirring the firelight like it, too, had heard every word. That night, Elodie sat by the window, her scarf folded neatly in her lap. She didn't touch the glass. She just listened. Will the sheriff come? She asked softly. Likely. Will he take me? Colt knelt to throw another log on the fire. Not if the town remembers what it means to look someone in the eye. She smiled faintly. I don't know what that means. He looked up at her. It means people can't pretend anymore. They saw you. She nodded, then turned her face toward the flame. I want to plant something come spring. What? Doesn't matter. Just want to feel something grow. Days passed, then weeks. Winter stayed, but it softened. The sky grew less cruel. The cabin, once still a stone, now pulsed with quiet life. Elodie learned the rhythm of the home, the creak of floorboards, the music of boiling stew, the way snow sounded when it fell on cedar. She folded his shirts with a precision that came from care, not sight. She asked where the hens were and how long it took an egg to cook. She touched every book on the shelf by spine and scent. Colt carved her a walking stick one afternoon, birch, smooth and slender, with a loop of leather at the top. He didn't say anything when he gave it to her, just laid it on the table. She ran her fingers along its grain like reading a letter. That evening, she used it to walk out onto the porch, slowly, one hand on the rail, the other tapping the stick across the boards. You built this porch strong, she said. I hope someone might stand on it. In town, the gossip turned. Some called Colt foolish, others dangerous. But the voices that mattered, the shopkeeper who had seen the bruises, the teacher who remembered Elodie's quiet hunger, grew louder. Maggie Jean wrote a letter to the sheriff, listing every time Pearl had slapped the girl in the street. Sheriff Tillman showed up 2 days later. You got visitors coming, he said, hat in hand. Court hearing will be called. Pearl's pushing for custody. Colt didn't flinch. She doesn't want custody. She wants to feel clean. Tillman nodded. You'll need to speak. She's already stirring talk about impropriety. Colt looked at Elodie, who was shelling beans by the stove. She has a voice too, Colt said. The hearing came. Not in a grand hall or courthouse, but in the back of the church, where truth felt more at home than law. Elodie stood in front of the townsfolk with her hands folded neatly at her waist. Her hair was combed, her scarf tidy. Her walking stick stood beside her like a sentinel. Do you know where you are? Sheriff Tillman asked. I'm standing in front of people I can't see, she said. But I hear them just fine. Do you want to return to your stepmother's care? No. Why? She told me I was a shadow. She said I was the part of the house that never felt warm. And I started believing her. But I don't anymore. Why not? Because kindness doesn't make you small. It makes you feel like you belong somewhere, even if you can't see it. Pearl tried to interrupt, but Tillman raised a hand. Where is your home now, Elodie May? She turned her head slightly toward the corner where Colt stood. My home is where the porch creaks and the kettle sings. Where I'm allowed to plant things in spring. Where someone waits for me without asking why I'm slow. The room stayed still for a long time after that. The town ruled in her favor. Pearl was fined, warned, and watched. But she was no longer feared. Shame had unraveled her faster than justice ever could. Colt didn't say much on the ride home. Neither did Elodie. But when they arrived, she stepped off the horse and tapped her way to the porch without waiting for his hand. She stopped at the door, turned slightly. I don't feel like a shadow anymore. Inside, the cabin felt lighter, as if it, too, had been waiting to exhale. Spring crept in with cautious fingers. Buds on the edge of branches. Soft earth under melting snow. Elodie planted marigolds near the front step. She worked by sound and touch, burying each seed like a prayer. Colt built her a raised bed so she wouldn't need to kneel. He didn't say it was for her, just left it there. One morning, she sat in the rocker with her scarf draped like a sash. She faced the open window, smiling faintly. "I think the birds are arguing again," she said. "They always do this time of year. I like how you don't try to fix everything." He blinked. "Is that a complaint?" "No. It means I know you're not afraid to wait for things to grow." He stood in the doorway, watching her. The fire was out. The air smelled like loam and morning. And then, hoofbeats. Fast. Unsteady. Colt stepped off the porch. A boy from town galloped up, breathless. "Sir," he said, eyes wide. "Sheriff says Pearl's gone." "Gone." She packed up. "But she said she was coming back. And that she's not done." Colt's jaw tightened. "Thank you, son. Go on back." When he turned, Elodie was standing in the doorway. "Should I be afraid?" "No," he said. "But you should be ready." She nodded. "Then light the lantern." He moved to the windowsill, struck a match, and let the flame catch. The lantern glowed gold, defiant against the gathering dusk. "I'll leave it lit," he said. Elodie smiled. "It already is."